Today we're going to talk about the sounds of silence. And no, I don't mean the Simon and Garfunkel song. I mean what happens when the arts fail to get funding and eventually no one is left to play. Something like that just played out here in San Antonio, and I want to talk about it. Hey, you're watching Alamo Music TV. My name is Chris McKee with Alamo Music Center in San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, turn on notifications, like our videos. Check out our spring store for custom shirts. It's linked in the description. And check out our podcast, the Fretboard Confessional, where I talk about things I probably shouldn't, and I will definitely be talking about this in more depth on there. It's wherever you get podcasts. So I woke up this morning to some not very great news. The news that I read was that the board of the San Antonio Symphony had decided to disband it and file for bankruptcy. This was the second time that's been done since I think 2003. When that was done and it was avoided, the symphony rejoined. We were able to enjoy them in the city, but it continued on with a lot of basically struggles with leadership and funding for the San Antonio Symphony. Now you should know that at Alamo Music, I'm speaking from a particular place of care when it comes to the symphony. Alamo Music has supported the symphony basically since its inception in 1933. As a music store, we place a lot of importance on the arts in our city. We think that it's important from an educational standpoint and also from a cultural standpoint so that people who visit our city and people who are raised here can understand and appreciate what the arts are all about. Around our country, we continue to see arts being not very well funded. And that was one of the things that was in the article and in the comments on the article that I read about today. Now, I'm not going to get in the middle of the dispute between the musicians and the board. I will tell you that what's been happening here is that the symphony has been on strike basically throughout the entire year as they fought in a protracted measure to try to get better wages taking place. And from the board standpoint, they continue to say, well, the money just simply wasn't there. You need to play for what we can pay you, and that's that. And at the end of the day, the board decided, rather than disbanding the board and coming up with new leadership that might be able to find new and creative ways to ensure that there would be funding for the musicians and for the city that has enjoyed this symphony since 1933, it would be better to just hold their positions, disband the symphony, and file for bankruptcy, a decision I just simply cannot support. Now, I don't think it's unique to our city. I keep reading about symphonies throughout the country that are struggling and having to find ways of dealing with fundraising and usually shuttering as a result of it. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Rather than get into the middle of a thing where I will probably 100% always support the musicians, because without musicians you don't have a symphony, let's just talk about the basic problem going on in our society today. There's not enough funding for the arts. We hear this constantly, over and over and over. There's not enough funding for the visual arts. There's not enough funding for media arts. There's not enough funding for musical arts. And as a result of that, what eventually happens is that these places shutter. And then people are left walking around wondering, why don't we have this in our city? Why don't we have what we previously had in the past that was beautiful exposure to music and educational for our young people? You have to think about the trickle-down effect that something like this has from the fifth grader that starts playing violin and continues on through high school, choosing whether or not they want to pursue that as their degree, regardless of how talented he or she may be. So many people continue to choose another path in life because as a society, we have chosen that it is easier to raise millions of dollars for any type of sport investment and to placard big buildings with people's names on it than it ever is to raise money for the arts. The symphony here in San Antonio recently, from what I understand, received a whopping $330,000 investment from the city of San Antonio, which is dwarfed by the city's investment in the San Antonio Spurs installation that is not going to be basketball focused, but rather kind of a sports park complex going in town. And hey, I'm all for that. I'm a huge Spurs fan. I love sports. I love basketball. I love all of those things. I'm just saying, why can't we have both? Why is it so one-sided? Why doesn't the money ever materialize for the cultural things that so many people find important, when it seems to always be there for the endless road projects that nobody can get right the first 5 times? I'm sure, again, that our city is not unique in this aspect, but I find it to be a failure of leadership and maybe a failure on our parts, a failure on the part of society to recognize the importance of these things. Joni Mitchell said, "You don't realize what you've got until it's gone." And this morning I woke up and was faced with that situation. Now I'm hoping that something can be done. I'm hoping that there's a solution that can be found, that new leadership can organize something. Call it the Philharmonic if you want to, I don't know. But we need the arts in our city. We need every punk band, every math rock band, every country band, every string musician. We need all of it. We need these things to represent the various aspects of our culture and to enrich future generations. And I'm scared to think of what future generations might look like if they don't have exposure to that. If all they ever have exposure to is, some stadium with someone's revolving name on it, the Gigaplex or whatever you want to call it. We need to fund our arts. Maybe you and I need to do a better job of caring about what's going on, of buying tickets for the symphony in our particular city, of going to see those live performances that people work so hard and so diligently to put on, to get out and see live music again now that the pandemic is waning. It's up to us to do our part and to tell those who are in charge, figure it out, do a better job, get creative. And if you can't, move aside and find someone who can. That's my take on it. I'd love to hear from you what you think we can do to shore up the arts in our schools and to ensure that students who have a passion for it can make a living at it and shouldn't have to starve and eat ramen just so that they can do what their God-gifted talented allows them to do. So drop a comment below. How are things where you are? Do you have a symphony? Do you go to it? Have you seen struggles in your local area? And maybe you have an idea. Let's crowdsource this. What can be done to ensure that talented people can make music for all of us to enjoy for generations to come? Anyways, thanks for listening to my soapbox diatribe. Hopefully we figure something out here and for future generations to come. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, turn on notifications, and like our videos. I always say when we talk about guitars that the best one in the world is the one you're playing. I believe that playing music can change your life. So if you play music, keep playing. And if you don't, start. See you next time.